Good morning everyone, I'm in western Nevada. In this video I'm going to be basically driving across most of Nevada, seeing a handful of interesting and fun and unique things along the way. This place is called the International Car Forest in Goldfield, Nevada. And there are several of these kinds of places across the US. Some of the more famous ones are Carhenge in Nebraska, I think, and Cadillac Ranch in Texas. This one is called the International Car Forest. And yeah, it's basically just a bunch of cars sticking out of the ground. There's a bus on top of the hill there. Maybe we'll go there in a second. But here it's just a graveyard of cars. They're like tombstones sticking up out of the ground. The sign at the entrance said, "Taggers tolerated, artists welcome." And you can see a lot of people have brought their own paint and added their own touch to the cars here. Here's that bus that's on top of the hill. And from here you have a nice view overlooking the entire forest, entire car forest. Not sure I personally understand the need to half bury cars on your property and invite people to come graffiti on them. Not what I would do with my land, but hey, if that's what does it for you, great. Interesting little place to visit. This is actually the first one of these types of places that I've been to. I haven't been to the more famous ones before, so yeah, it's kind of fun. And now there's one more thing in town here that's also odd, arguably even odder than this, that I want to go see and show you. I think it's on the other side of town here. So this town, Goldfield, was a mining boom town in the first decade of the 20th century. People came from all over to mine gold here, and some people who came here, nothing really was known about them, and that is the case of this guy whose grave I'm at right now. Unknown man died eating library paste, July 14th, 1908. It's another interesting one kind of next to him here. Gunshot by deputy sheriff. Huh. But returning to this guy, the guy who died eating library paste, apparently he was just a vagrant who entered town. No one knew who he was or where he came from, and he was hungry and looking for something to eat. He didn't have any money, and so he was rummaging around in the trash behind the library, found a jar of library paste, and ate it, thinking that it was edible, but unfortunately it wasn't, and he died from eating it, and so they buried him here. These are really interesting headstones. They're just rocks that have been painted. This is the earliest part of this cemetery here, where the pioneers and early miners are buried. This guy was a bootblack, died of a gunshot wound. Here's someone else who died of a gunshot. I think this one says self-strangulation. I can't imagine living here back in the day in the early 1900s, and it must have just been a wild and crazy place. I mean, I guess that's why they call it the Wild West, but usually you think of the Wild West as a little bit earlier than that. You don't think of it as being in the 1900s, but out here I think it still was. And apparently there's still gold mining that goes on around here today. I wasn't planning on exploring this town very much, but I actually want to go back to the downtown area and take a closer look at some of those interesting little buildings and shops and everything. So I know I show a map at the beginning of every video where I'm going to be in that video, but let me give you a better idea of where I am and where I'm going. So this is Nevada right here, and I am in Goldfield right here, just south of Tonopah. So I'm here and I'm going today here. So I'm going to be driving across most of Nevada. I'm going to end up somewhere in this area south of Elko, probably. And I'm going to be kind of zigzagging my way through the state, hitting a few different things along the way here. Should be a fun day. Lots of driving, but also lots of fun, kind of unique things to see here. Outside of the library here in town, there's a display of a bunch of old mining equipment. Old trucks, old mine carts. Here's an old cement mixer from 1900. Again, with wheels on it, so it would have been on a track somewhere in or adjacent to a mine. This is interesting. These are some old dummy bombs. These used to be filled with sand, and they were used as practice bombs during and around World War II, used by bombers flying out of Tonopah Army Airfield. This is an air-powered jackhammer from the 1920s, used in mining, that replaced these hand tools. Just a hammer and chisels and big biceps, I would assume. This was used to bring ore up out of mines by hand. So this is the hand crank that you would turn. There would be rope spooled around this, lowered down into a mine shaft. And so they'd lower down buckets into the shaft, and the miners down there would fill them up, and then they'd hand crank them out. Got a couple of cool old cars here. This is a Ford dump truck from the 30s. And then this is a 1919 Model T. That's, I mean, just a bare skeleton at this point, but still really, really neat. That was a surprisingly great little stop, but let's head deeper into town here. I'm just a sucker for old mining towns, especially ones that are a little bit dilapidated, a little bit falling apart. This visit to Goldfield turned out to be much longer than I anticipated. I was just going to drive through and see the car forest and see the library paste eater grave, but it turned out to be a really interesting, unique little town. Unfortunately, there was a fire back in the 1920s that burned down a lot of the old historic buildings, but there's still a good number to see around here if you drive through town and around town, and I really enjoyed my visit here. And I'm now going to drive, 20 minutes, half an hour up the road to a town called Tonopah, which is a similar kind of thing. It's an old mining town, kind of built in the hills, and has a neat old look about it. So I'm going to probably stop there very briefly and show that to you guys. So welcome to Tonopah. Tonopah was a predominantly silver mining city, whereas Goldfield was obviously predominantly a gold mining town. Nevada is known as the Silver State, but I think most of that comes from the Comstock area near Virginia City in far western Nevada, over by Carson City and Reno. But places like this, I'm sure, helped contribute to that image also. I'm at Tonopah Historic Mining Park. Got some nice views overlooking the town here. This is the downtown area. And let's go take a look at a couple of these head frames. And like in Goldfield, there's a lot of old mining paraphernalia and machinery here. I'm not going to show you everything. I think we got enough of that in Goldfield, but I do want to take a look at a couple of these head frames here. This one that I'm walking to, apparently you can look down into the mine shaft. It's a 1,000-foot deep mine shaft, and you can look down about 600 feet into it. Check this out. So this is a stope. This is where the ore was pretty close to the surface. and where it was mined pretty close to the surface. Miners put these wooden beams in. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see the wooden beams in there? They put those in to keep the walls from collapsing. So this was all mined out. Maybe we can see it better on the other side here. This bridge here crosses over the stope. There we go. Never seen one of these before. And here's where we can look down 600 feet into this 1,000-foot deep mine shaft. That is amazing. And the heyday of the silver boom here was similar to that of the gold boom in Goldfield, first decade or so of the 20th century. Check this out, I've never seen anything like this before. So this cage here is on a cable that goes up this boom arm and then is anchored to the front of this truck here. Presumably this cage was used to lower miners down into this shaft here. That does not seem especially safe. Then again, I think there's a lot about mining that isn't especially safe. Here's one of the older wooden head frames. So there would be big spools, big drums here that would have thousands of feet of cable on them. The cable would run up to here. There would be big pulleys up here, and then the cable would be lowered down into the mine shaft, again, to haul men and supplies and ore in and out of the mine shaft. And from that mine, there's a great view of the entire town. I think the population is now about 2,000 people. I assume it was higher back in the day, back in its heyday. The downtown area is over here. Let's go head down there. This is grand old downtown Tonopah. Don't have a whole lot to say about it, but I do have a question for you guys. So do you see this mural over here that says Tonopah? That style, where did that style come from? Where did it come from? When did it originate? Because cities across the country have their names illustrated like that, and I want to know where it came from. So if you know, please let me know. But yeah, all your essentials here: a casino, liquor store, gas station, A&W. Right here is a famous hotel. Apparently it's famous. Let me cross the street here to give you a better look. Apparently back in the day this was a grand old hotel, and I can see how in 1905, 1907 this would have seemed just so luxurious and amazing out in the middle of nowhere in the Nevada desert. Because again, even today this is the middle of nowhere. So 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago, this definitely would have felt like the middle of nowhere. And then I would be a poor tour guide if I came to Tonopah and didn't share with you the infamous Clown Motel. I don't know who thought this was a good idea, but yeah, it's a clown-themed motel. Apparently there are a couple thousand clown figurines in the office over there. I'm not interested in seeing that. It's reported to be America's scariest motel, due to both the clowns, which a lot of people hate, and also because there's an old pioneer cemetery right next to the motel there. So apparently spirits frequent the rooms of the motel here. Actually, you know what? As long as we're here, let's go into the office. Let's go see all of these creepy clowns. Thankfully, it says photography welcome here. I looked at photos from reviews of this place on Google Maps. The rooms themselves don't look that bad. I mean, they're decently clean. There is the occasional scary clown picture on the wall, so maybe that's not to your taste, not to your style, but it seemed like a decent place overall. 2 hours later, and I'm in the mountains at about 6,500 feet above the town of Austin, Nevada. I'm at a castle. This is Stokes Castle. It's built in 1897 and used for only a couple of months. Built by a guy named Anson Phelps Stokes. He was a local railroad and mining tycoon. He built this, again, at this relatively high elevation as a summer home for him and his family. On the bottom floor, there was a kitchen. Second floor, there was a dining room, and then bedrooms up on top here. It was made from locally hewn granite, and it has basically sat unoccupied since 1897. So it was built back then, used for a couple of months, hasn't been used since. I think I read that it's now owned by the local historical society. And it's just wasting away out here in the desert, just like it's been doing for the last 120 something years. And here's a view of the castle from the little hill behind it. I love it. I'd love to have a house here, have a 3-story tower here. That'd be great. Pretty soon after it was built and after the family stayed in the castle, they sold their mining interest in this area, and along with that they sold the castle, so that's why they never stayed there again. I don't know why no one ever lived in it afterward. This is a spot I've been wanting to visit for years just because I've been seeing pictures of it for a long time, and it's a weird thing to have out in the high Nevada desert, you know. You don't come across many castles out on the frontier. Let's go on to our next spot. I think it's probably half an hour, 45 minutes from here. I'm now at a campground up in the Toquima Mountains, or Takima Mountains. I have no idea how to pronounce it. I think it's a Native American name. I'm at just under 8,000 feet, and I'm going to a cave by the same name. Takuma Cave, Toquima, not sure what it is. Okay, so it's about a 10-minute walk from the campground to the cave here. And it is pretty heavily guarded. It's completely barred up. But even so, you can still see the pictographs really well, and they are stunning. That is just incredible. One thing I read said that they're between 1,500 and 3,000 years old. I think another thing I read said that they were a little bit newer. These are some of the crispest, just most unique looking pictographs I've ever seen. Here's a closer look at some of the more detailed panels. Of course, I would love to go inside the cave, get deeper in there, and have an up-close look at the images, but I understand why this gate is here, and I agree with it. I think that this is the kind of thing that you really do need to protect. And then here's the view looking out from the mouth of the cave onto mountain ranges and forested slopes out in the distance. Beautiful day today, gorgeous clouds. One other thing I read that I thought was interesting was that they think that this was just used as a temporary shelter instead of a long-term habitation site, because when they excavated it, they found relatively few artifacts, the kinds of things you would expect to find in a shelter if it were continuously inhabited for a long period of time. There's one more thing that I've been wanting to see for years, and I never have, because with this part of Nevada, it's not really the kind of place that you just pass through. It's not really on the way to much of anything. And so you really need to go here with purpose, with the purpose of seeing these places. Otherwise, they're probably not going to be along your standard travel route. Got some wild horses here. At the top of this little hill here, we should be able to see what we came here to see. Welcome to Diana's Punch Bowl. This is crazy. This is just a random geothermal hill in the middle of this valley out here. This opening here is about 50 feet across, and it's about 30 feet deep. These cliffs are about 30 feet high. And this water down in here is supposed to be 200 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very hot. You would not want to get in there. I don't know if you can see that beautiful crystal clear turquoise tinged water there, but that is spectacular. What a strange and beautiful place. Let's get the drone out. About half an hour before sunset now, and even though I ideally wanted to get a little more driving in today to be a little bit closer to where I'm going to be tomorrow, I figured it was probably best to just pull over and find a campsite while I still had a little bit of light left. So let me show you this campsite. So for the past half hour or so, I've been driving this way along this valley here, just driving along here, and look how beautiful this valley is. It's just empty. There's nothing out here. That's so great. Anyway, I pulled over, I hung a left to tuck up into these mountains here. I'm nestled right up close to the mountains here. Really beautiful campsite. These mountains are called the Diamond Mountains. Never heard of this mountain range before, don't know anything about it. I looked on my map and it looks like this mountain right behind me here that I can see pretty clearly. This one is Diamond Peak. It's about 8,800 feet high. Not especially high, but pretty. And then here's a closer look at the actual campsite itself, where I'm parked. It's a good spot. Check out how pronounced my farmer's tan is getting. I love it. It happens every summer. I tan pretty easily, and obviously I spend a lot of time outside, and that means that I get a pretty intense farmer's tan each year. While I talk here, I'm going to show some drone footage of this area and of this campsite. But overall, I had a really good day. It didn't really go according to plan. There were a couple of things that I had on my list that didn't make it into this video. There were things that I hadn't planned on doing or seeing that did end up making it in this video, and that's always a fun part of traveling, just seeing what catches your interest when you're on the road and then allotting more time to those things, like those mining towns today, Goldfield and what was the other one? Tonopah. I think Nevada is an underrated state in the West. Obviously it's a big state, but there's a lot to see and do here, and the more time I spend here, and it's like this everywhere, the more time I spend in a place, the more things I find that I want to see and do. Usually I'm kind of on the edges of the state of Nevada, like I'm in the Reno-Carson City area on the far west side, or I'm in Las Vegas on the far southern side, or like I'm just over the border from Utah on the far east side, or same thing in the far northern side. I don't spend a ton of time in the center of Nevada, and I wanted to make sure I did that a little bit on this trip. And I did that today, and I really enjoyed it. And again, I think this is a place I'll come back to for future adventures. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video too. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions. Let me know what your favorite part of the video was. I think my favorite part, that's a tough one. I really liked the mining towns, and I really liked Diana's Punch Bowl. I think Goldfield was probably my favorite of the day, just because I hadn't planned on it, and it turned out to be a really interesting little mining town. So that's my favorite. Let me know what yours was. Thanks again for watching. Be sure to tune in to the next video. It's going to be a really fun adventure in a really spectacular place, and I think you guys will enjoy it. Thanks again. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to check out Adventure Know-How, my new site, where you can gain access to a map of all of my free campsites, plus monthly bonus videos that you won't find anywhere else. Learn more at adventureknowhow.com. And for links to everything else SUV RVing related, visit suvrving.com. Links to these sites and more will be in the video description.